electrocuted,
decapitated,
fractured vertebrae,
impaled on the bowl,
had a heart attack.
Nothing in the world like action park.
Baby, let me take you where the action is hot.
There were no rules. For a lot of kids, that was heaven.
and if you couldn't swim well, yikes.
So I love this piece very much. But biggest misconception is that we're paid well.
It was dubbed the world's tallest water slide, a vertigo-inducing ride with a nearly vertical 17-story freefall. Taller than the Statue of Liberty, riders reaching speeds of up to 50 miles an hour. The thrill ride came to a grisly, and prosecutors say, murderous stop. 10-year-old Caleb Schwab had been decapitated while going down the water slide. Yet the indictment alleges Henry knew the water slide was, quote, a seriously dangerous piece of equipment, yet opened it anyway.
Don claims SeaWorld downplayed acts of whale aggression, wanting to maintain its family-friendly image.
Indy Irwin in hot water.
We are so thrilled to finally be joining SeaWorld.
Save me.
Twitter exploded in condemnation.
It used to be such a wonderful blue planet.
Australia Zoo today issued a statement defending the initiative. Bindi Irwin is thrilled to be involved with SeaWorld.
No fear of anyone till humans overrun.
Guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Here it's me here, Lavender, Comrade Lavender here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism true crime deep dive video. Today I'm going to be doing the Pure Evil, the amusement park / water park industry files, a deep dive into the true crime cases. So let's get started into this YouTube video topic. Disney's treatment of its workers, anti-communism phobia. The company is known for its anti-union stance, poor treatment of employees and workers, and has been accused of paying slave wages overseas to employees who manufacture toys, and in the parks themselves, in the United States alone, treating employees like wage slaves. Disney has also emerged as one of the most powerful opponents of the growing national trend to enact paid sick leave for employees, all while the CEO and higher-ups at Disney make massive capitalism profits. Capitalism puts profits over lives every day underneath the capitalism system. Given Disney's profits, it may also come as a surprise that the men and women who operate rides, portray your favorite costume characters in cosplay, in fur costumes, serve your food and clean up, the parks often struggle to make ends meet. Wages at Walt Disney World are 68% lower than the national average, with Disney paying as little as $13,000 per year. Some individuals working at Disney World can't afford a place to live because a giant corporation underpays its staff. According to Forbes, the Walt Disney Company is worth almost $180 billion, making it one of the top 10 most valuable capitalist brands in the world. CEO Robert Iger earned around $44 million in 2016. Disney-themed parks generate one-third of the company's operating revenue, and in 2013, Disney made $2.2 billion in profits from its parks alone. In 2014, a former employee of Disneyland filed a class action lawsuit against the company that included charges of failing to provide paid vacation, failing to provide paid wages at the time of termination of employment, and committing other wage violations. In 2006, the National Labor Regulations Board filed a lawsuit against Walt Disney World for allegedly outsourcing jobs without bargaining with an employee union. The suit came after a year-long investigation into the matter. A 2011 lawsuit claimed that Disney had misclassified employees as exempt managers, so it would not be required to pay overtime. The employees also charged the company imposed deadlines and work rules that made it impossible for them to take breaks by the California labor law. 3 African-American employees filed suit against Walt Disney World, alleging that the company systematically passed over non-white employees for promotion to management jobs. The 3 also charged that the company used software that could select white employees' resumes based on naming conventions, and in 2012, a U.S. citizen of Moroccan origin filed a suit against Disney for discrimination, charging harassment and religious discrimination at Disney's California adventure. She allegedly was told she could not wear the hijab, and she was actually fired over it, and then she filed suit. And to top it all off with the cherry on top, Disney World settles 16 animal cruelty charges. Attraction will pay $95,000 to avoid going to court. Walt Disney World agreed to pay $95,000 to settle 16 animal cruelty charges against the company. The money is 3 times the amount the company could have been fined if it was convicted of all the animal abuse charges in trial. Disney will pay the bulk of the money, $75,000, to the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. A commission attorney said the money will be used to start airing television and radio public service announcements to educate the public about wildlife and environmental preservation and conservation, wildlife conservation. Another $10,000 will help operate a Florida Society Center in Midland that rehabilitates injured wild birds. The final $10,000 will be paid to the federal government. According to the state and federal charges filed in September, Disney workers beat vultures to death, held dozens of vultures in a small overheated shed with little food and water, shot at hawks and falcons, and knocked eggs from the nests of egrets and ibis. In 2005, the health department in Albuquerque closed down a local water park called the beach, citing overwhelming health concerns. Someone who grew up in Albuquerque was not at all surprised by this, and the health department found cockroaches in the lazy river, or algae blooming inside the children's slide. The entire amusement park smelled like fried onions and industrial bleach, and lifeguards were hard to come by and a rarity. The park's star attraction, the 75-foot-tall Big Plunge Slide, featured a free fall that would often send riders flying only to smack their rear ends back on the fiberglass with monstrous friction. It was a badge of honor to walk around the park all day with an oozing plunge bruise. A notorious case of Waterpark dangers was a true crime case of Action Park. The new HBO Max original documentary, Class Action Park, talks in detail about this shady park and the allegations that came of it. Action Park, which is located in Vernon, New Jersey, the park, which opened in the 1970s, which boasted dicey thrills with very little oversight or regulations. The staff at Action Park, or what would become to be known as Class Action Park, or Traction Park, was almost entirely composed of underage teenagers, lots that were under the legal working age. A former employee in the documentary had described waking up on the park's grounds, hungover, and stumbling to his job overseeing a treacherous river ride. The park's clientele also tended to be rowdy teens, many of them latchkey kids whose parents rarely knew their whereabouts, and who were drawn to the Action Park not in spite of its dangers, but because of them. The owner designed many of the park's rides himself, or augmented existing designs to be more extreme and brutal. One water park slide with the loop in the middle, left riders, aka the victims of capitalism, with missing teeth and bloodied bruised backs. Chris Gayhard recalls how the amusement park's paths were made of black tar, not an ideal situation or material for deflecting heat. If you don't bring your own flip-flops or water shoes, he says you're going to suffer from the notorious ailment known as chopped meat feet, meaning your feet would be scalded or burned by the blacktop when it heats up if you had no shoes. Several former Action Park employees describe in shocking detail how very little they did to keep people safe and from getting hurt. One tube rider, the Roaring Rapids, featured a steep curve where several park-goers dislocated their arms and limbs and broke their noses. The park's approach to these risks was to embrace them as a natural byproduct of a thrilling experience. To maintain this posture, the owner was breaking the law. Instead of paying the pricey insurance premiums required to perpetuate the park's dangerous conditions, he created a fake insurance company in the Cayman Islands and then proceeded to insure himself. Ignoring rules is what callous pigs do best. Grave consequences would come. As one former park-goer says in the film, the magic and the horror of Action Park is that you can go there expecting a great time, expecting fantastic memories, and you can leave with those exact things. Oh, or you can leave in a body bag, and you didn't know which it was going to be. In the moment, the final act of the film explores several deaths, at least 6 that happened at this park, including one electrocution in the kayak experiences and multiple fatalities in the wave pool. Action Park quickly became synonymous with litigation and personal injury lawsuits. In 1984, the owner's company, Great American Recreation, came under fire and a grand jury investigation for deceiving the state about his insurance policy. He eventually took the plea bargain to avoid any jail time, accepting a $250,000 fine and a 3-year probation period. He managed to keep Action Park going by purchasing the land it was on from the state of New Jersey, and in 1985 giving him more leeway to set his own ground rules. The most galling moment of the film comes when the directors interview a woman whose son died after flying off the Alpine slide. Her anger and grief still palpable after 2 decades in this film. She says that the owner never once apologized for his actions to her family or even acknowledged any wrongdoing, typical capitalistic behavior. For her, the park is not a campy slice of bizarre Americana, but a place of unspeakable tragedy and misery. In 1998, the owner shut down Action Park after declaring bankruptcy, and after one of his close friends and investors was sentenced to 10 years in prison for money laundering. Here are some more true crime cases involving amusement parks. It was a Sunday afternoon, August 7th, 2016. 10-year-old Caleb Schwab began the 264-step climb to the top of the tallest ride, the water slide in the world, which loomed like over the 40-acre Schwabinen Waterpark in Kansas City. Caleb had come to the park with his father, Scott, a state legislator, his mother, Michelle, and his 3 brothers. That day, the park was offering free administration to Kansas elected officials and their families, along with a buffet lunch. According to the park rules, the rider who was riding had to be at least 4 feet 6 inches tall. Caleb was 4 feet 11 inches tall and weighed 72 pounds. He told his parents he had to try the ride. Behind him were 2 young women. One was 32 years old and the other was 25. Both of them were sisters. When the ride had started and took off, it must have felt to Caleb as if he had fallen off a skyscraper. Within a few seconds, the raft reached the bottom of the hill, but instead of staying in its fiberglass fume and cresting the hill, the raft flew up in the air. Caleb's head collided with the net and a semicircular metal hoop that anchored over the top of the slide. The metal hoop sliced into his neck, and he was instantly decapitated. His body flew out the raft and landed at the bottom along with his head of the ride. Waiting for Caleb at the bottom of the ride was one of his brothers, along with numerous spectators. As the boy's small corpse slid down the run-out pool, everyone began to scream. Onlookers prevented Caleb's mother from witnessing the crime scene. It was a horrible moment, as you could imagine. A person who was there told me, "A nightmare beyond comprehension. I can't begin to describe it." There was 11 total injuries on the ride prior to Caleb's tragic death and accident, and in 2016, maintenance problems were not reported, but prosecutors could tell the jury that Jeff and Schooley knew very well that the ride could lead to a catastrophe and was dangerous, yet they continued to push forward with their plans. They were determined to be known as the creators of the tallest and fastest water slide in all of the water park industry and history, putting capitalism profits and capitalist pigs' egos over victims of capitalism's lives. Other disgusting biohazards at water parks. The absolutely disgusting reason that people got sick at a water park in Ohio, an anonymous water park at Ohio business. Too much urine and too little fresh air probably made employees of an indoor water park in Ohio sick. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report, public health department should keep a close watch on the growing indoor water park industry. The agency says because you never know what could be in the water, this time is most likely pee along with sweat, dead skin cells, lotions, sunscreen, etc. The CDC reported today in its Morbidly Weekly report. The agency was called in to investigate an indoor water park in an unnamed, anonymous Ohio city after the local health department started getting complaints. People reported that their eyes were burning, their noses were extremely irritated, they were having trouble breathing, and some were throwing up. all after splashing around at the water park. Public aquat facilities are gross. Routine inspectors of public pools turned up health or safety violations at 80% of them, the CDC reported last year. The water can harbor bacteria, viruses, and parasites, and cleaning can make matters even worse. Chlorine disinfectants can react with molecules in swimmers' pee, sweat, dead skin, lotions, and sunscreens to produce irritating chemicals called chlorphines. Splashing wafts and irritants into the air where they form a nasty layer that hovers over the water surface. Complaints in Ohio started back in July 2015, and the CDC investigators arrived in January 2016. The investigators surveyed employees, tested the water, and inspected the water park's ventilation systems. The tests came back negative for the infectious diseases they suspected, and only turned up low levels of bacterial toxins. But the agency measured very high levels of chlorine compounds, which include nasty chloramines. This testing was in the winter too, when fewer visitors were present at the water park. Since employees working inside the water park were sicker than the ones working outside, and chloramines are known to cause eye and lung irritation, the CDC settled on these chemicals as the likely culprit. The investigators also discovered the water park's ventilation system didn't actually work, so the cold, moist, probably chlorine-latent, and definitely irritating air was just accumulating inside the building, burning people's eyes, hurting their lungs, and sending a few to the hospital and doctor's offices. Hawaiian Falls Parks fined for violating child labor laws. A Texas water park company has been fined by the U.S. Department of Labor has slapped a $86,000 penalty fine on Hawaiian Falls for exposing minors to hazardous working conditions. Hawaiian Falls let their employees under the age of 15 use dangerous equipment and work outside permitted hours. Six Flags Inc. has paid over $85,000 for violating federal child labor laws. The penalty resulted from investigations at Six Flags theme parks in Baltimore and the Oklahoma City area and involved the employment of 225 minors. SeaWorld, first off, is not a zoo. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what anybody says. Despite what they, SeaWorld themselves, and vegan PETA activists have to say about it, calling it a zoo, I don't think it's a zoo. Zoos are educational places that do lots of great conservation work and field science studies around the world and around the globe. Zoos actually help with biodiversity loss. Capitalism is the main cause of animal extinction and biodiversity loss as a whole. SeaWorld was always and is still like an ocean version of a circus. Circuses are known for animal abuse and animal exploitation, where animals are abused for entertainment. Just like in circuses, there's no difference between a circus and what SeaWorld is doing. The trainers used to get in the water and put on a show for the paying customers with the killer whales and put on a water-themed circus theme, tricks. They only changed the image to conservation efforts because people saw the documentary Blackfish, and SeaWorld started being a pro-money, typical capitalist company that only truly cares about making money and profits. Because they were losing money, they only changed their image. SeaWorld is no different than how Walt Disney Company is known for how they treat animals as a whole. Money is the only driving factor. Exploitation, labeled as conservation, is the latest way to lure tourists and customers after losing money and profits. It is no surprise that SeaWorld is moving its chips into the Middle Eastern market when you consider its downfall following the release of the 2013 American documentary Blackfish nearly a decade on. Every major UK tour operator from TripAdvisor to Virgin Holidays and British Airways Holidays have stopped selling tickets to its parks. On November 2014, SeaWorld announced that attendance at its park had dropped and profits had fallen 28% over that quarter. As of November 2014, the company's stock was down 50% from the previous year. From 2014 to 2015, net income for the second quarter fell 84%, from $37.4 million to $5.8 million, while revenue fell from $405 million to $392 million, and in February 2020, SeaWorld announced a $65 million settlement with investors who alleged the company had deceived them about the documentary's effect on park attendance. This is the true reason why they tried to clean up their image and act and save their reputation. They were losing their investors, aka their capitalism profit.
Tonight, SeaWorld and its former chief executive have agreed to pay the federal government $5 million. The reason is to settle fraud charges.
Now to our other breaking news at SeaWorld, where Tilikum, the killer whale that killed trainer Don Bradshaw, has died.
They are being subjected to sunlight without shade protection that causes cataracts and damage to the eyes. They're swimming in chemically treated water.
The documentary Blackfish grossed $2 million at the box office and has been seen by more than 21 million TV viewers after its broadcast on CNN. The movie challenges how SeaWorld treats its orcas, or killer whales, often called by the name Shamu. But also, their confinement could be inhumane, I should say. How did you come to the conclusion that the confinement might be part of the problem?
I think it's actually a combination of really understanding what it is that they need in the wild, and also understanding what it is that really happens at SeaWorld. And so in terms of what they need in the wild, we learn that over the course of the years, I'm a mother who took her kids to SeaWorld. So, I made this documentary without really knowing anything about whales or really the science behind them. They swim up to 100 miles a day.
Out in the wild.
Correct, in the wild. In captivity, they just do laps around a pool. They fight with one another in the pools in confinement because, although they do that, right, they vie for dominance in the wild. Once that subdominant animal loses that tussle, they're peaceful. That animal's now an outlier, and they kind of continue on quite peaceably. In captivity, nobody ever gets to flee. So they constantly fight.
In 2013, SeaWorld's treatment of killer whales in captivity was the basis of the documentary film Blackfish, which documents the history of Talcum, the male killer whale, a killer whale captured by Sealand of the Pacific, who has been involved in the deaths of 3 people in total. Talcum was initially in Sealand to begin with before he went to SeaWorld. He was punished by having food withheld if he didn't play ball or do circus tricks. He was locked in overnight with 2 females in a 30-feet cell. He was bullied by the said females. Bullying is a thing that all animals, including people, do. He was then sold to SeaWorld. All the abuses he suffered all his life at Sealand and SeaWorld as a whole made him into the whale he became. You cannot blame him for his behavior and what he went through. He thought Don, the trainer at SeaWorld, was withholding food from him after he had done his bit. He had missed a whistle cue to tell him to stop. They had run out of food, and then Don sent him off without a reward. What the hell did they expect? That poor whale probably suffered from some type of post-traumatic stress disorder. He probably essentially went into a whale panic attack or post-traumatic stress disorder attack, having flashbacks of his past and current abuses in the SeaWorld bathtub. Terrified that the workers would start treating him the way they did at Sealand regularly, he probably did this. Dawn didn't deserve this. She did everything she was trained to do. SeaWorld is ultimately responsible for putting her and other workers and did the shows in that position and convincing them that it was safe when it wasn't safe at all. And they tried to tidy up their poor animal-abusing pro-capitalism image by employing Steve Irwin's famous conservationist daughter, Bindi Irwin, for conservation projects for SeaWorld kids, which is really strange and weird that she would knowingly work with SeaWorld, because Steve Irwin, if I'm correct, opposed crocodilian farming and harvesting. He rescued abused crocodiles, but yet the Irwin family is okay with SeaWorld exploitation of the killer whales and other places that have dolphins in captivity. I'm not a fan of them because this and other drama within the family. Bindi Irwin's grandfather speaks out and blasts SeaWorld. Just days after Bindi Irwin, daughter of the late wildlife expert Steve Irwin, conservationist, took to Good Morning America to announce a new partnership with SeaWorld. Her grandfather, naturalist and conservationist Bob Sr. Irwin, has weighed in on the whole drama. The Bob Irwin Wildlife and Conservation Foundation, in a clear jab at SeaWorld, Bob Sr. Irwin blasted the use of captive animals for the performance of tricks with the intent of mere entertainment for financial gain, aka a fucking water-themed circus. My personal stance, he goes on to say, is that any organization that keeps animals in captivity, that does not consider and provide that for the animal's physical, mental, and emotional needs, should not be keeping the animal, and other solutions should be sought out. The Bob Irwin Wildlife and Conservation Foundation, Inc. I do not support the use of captive animals for the performance of tricks with the intent of mere entertainment for financial gain. My son, Steve Irwin, fought tirelessly for the welfare of animals and for educating the public about conservation. Steve had a big heart for wildlife, and where he saw injustice and cruelty, he spoke out. Steve and I were as one on the issues of animal welfare, community education, and engagement in conservation. Bandy Irwin and Chandler Powell are accused of selling out by their own fans by doing sponsored posts on Instagram, when in reality they sold out a long time ago by working with SeaWorld. When it comes to how the employees are treated at the SeaWorld parks or projects,
a tourist home video captured Don Brand's show, playfully feeding Tilikum the killer whale. But moments later, this show would take a horrifying turn when the 6-ton whale turned on his trainer.
Came back around to the glass, jumped up, and grabbed the trainer by the waist and started shaking her violently, and her shoe, last thing we saw was her shoe floating.
A police report describes multiple trainers attempting to corral Tilikum using nets, with Brand's show inside Tilikum's mouth. She did not survive. Immediately, questions arose over how this could happen to a 17-year veteran of SeaWorld, seen here talking about the animals she loved.
We interact with them day in, day out. We're working together and having a lot of fun as well.
Investigators learned Tilly had a violent past, including drowning a trainer at a park in Canada.
Capitalism obviously puts the, money before its employees. It puts profits over lives. As usual, SeaWorld trainer Dawn was killed in 2010 when a killer whale pulled her into the water and refused to let go of her during a live show. A lawsuit came out of that the court said that SeaWorld had exposed trainers and employees to hazards while working on the job in close contact with killer whales by getting in the water during performances. The agency has fined the company $75,000 after the trainer Dawn had drowned by the killer whale Talnum. A New Hampshire family had also sued the park, saying that their 10-year-old son was traumatized after witnessing the whole thing happen in front of him. A former SeaWorld staffer who says she was fired after 45 years is suing the company for alleged age discrimination and decades of unpaid overtime.